Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 10 of Farm to Table, wrapping it up. How's everybody doing? Staying healthy, eating a lot of fresh garlic. Highly recommend it. It's a good thing to do. Builds the immune system. So let's first talk business, this is week 10, right? That means week 11 is next week, which means all makeup assignments are due. So if you are missing anything assignment wise, get that in ASAP. The sooner you get it in, the better. We don't accept any makeup assignments after next Tuesday. So that is your one and only chance if you're missing an assignment. I do see some positive notes about spring having been sprung, which is great. Same as well where I am. Lots of great greenery coming up, which is always fantastic. So enjoy it. Lots of fresh produce to use. All right, so week 10, like I said, we're almost done with this course, right? Remember, week 12 ends early on Sunday of that following week, which is something to be prepared for and look ahead to, just so that you're ready to finish the class strong. All right, so first and foremost, let's do a little refresh on week 9. Did anybody have any questions, comments, or observations that they would like to share from last week's production? Seen some fantastic work so far. Yes, Frida.
I had a question about the dried apples. So I noticed I played around after I took the picture to turn in for the final photo, but they rehydrated themselves after being left out on the counter. They were kind of, I pushed them till they were a little bit crispy, but that's probably why I've never liked them in the store, because, they look like those little donuts and they're like, the texture's just like gross chewy when you buy them in the store. But I noticed I set them out on the counter and I wondered what was the best way to store those if you were going to use them in a restaurant, because it was very humid here and they rehydrated themselves sitting out.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to ask you if you live in a humid area.
Yeah.
If you live in a humid area, climate, you've got limited time. You need to get those out of the oven, cool them down, and then you want to store them in an airtight container. And also, with things like that, living in a humid area, you're going to want to not make as much, right? Because otherwise you risk getting a little bit of air humidity in there and plumping up. So that's kind of it. Same like when you're frying something, right? When once you've fried, and if you let that sit out, and if you're in a humid area, it's not going to keep that nice crisp crunch, right? If you've had experience with that, I'm sure you've seen that as well. Those are kind of the only tricks I have. You can also think about how you can control your own climate, right? Which would be if you are in a humid area, you want to shut the windows and turn on the AC. It's not cost effective. It's not really that sustainable, but that is another way of doing it, right? Control your own mini climate. Chef Bryce, any other things to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, how far did you take them? Because in that case, if they are going to reabsorb, you can almost maybe take it a step farther as well, because you can take that factor in, and that they are going to take in that humidity or moisture in the air. So maybe pushing it a little bit farther on those as well, to, at least so they can absorb some of it and still maintain some of that texture that you're looking for as well. So maybe pushing the envelope on that. I mean, it's, a lot of trial and error in that, but that's what I would suggest, is just pushing it maybe a little bit farther to increase that shelf life for that texture that you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Shanna.
Okay, I had a question about the strawberry preserves. So I did my preserves and they were still, it didn't have enough pectin, I don't think. I used the serving size that they said, but I needed a lot more than what they said. Is that normal, or?
It can happen, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
It can also be if you how long did you cook them down for, right? Because you want that sugar to reduce, you want the strawberries actually to start to break down, and then the pectin. So that could be another factor if it wasn't cooked and reduced long enough.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, hold on, this ain't balancing out. But it eventually, I was like, if I let it sit, maybe it'll thicken. So it thickened a little, but it was like enough to put, believe me, I used it all on ice cream. So it was fabulous, delicious. So yeah. It
Good.
came out delicious, but I mean, I wanted it, you know, a thicker consistency. So I was trying to figure out what was I missing there.
Yeah, I would say look at your moisture content of your strawberries too. I mean, seasonality, that's what we're talking about, is really important. And how, you think about biting into that strawberry. Is it like raw and crisp, or is it like rich and juicy? So,
I'm in
uh,
Florida. Everything's juicy right
yeah.
now. So,
So you probably have a higher moisture content as
okay.
well. So you might need to have that. But what I would always suggest is follow that recipe, let it sit. If when it cools, it'll definitely solidify a little bit, and you can see from there. It's okay to make almost what we call like a slurry and add it to it with the pectin, not a slurry, but uh, rehydrate some pectin and add it to it, because then you can solidify it a little bit too. So don't feel like you have
Good
to
idea.
yeah, go ahead. You can
I
always
was saying
add to
good
it.
idea. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I've had to do that multiple times with things that haven't set properly. You can actually take that and reheat it as well and add some more of that pectin to achieve that level of consistency that you're looking for.
Another quick way to tell if it's going to be the right consistency when it cools down is getting like taking a plate and or a spoon and putting it in the freezer, all right, and then taking a little bit of your jam or preserve out and putting it on the plate and see how it holds, because that's going to bring that temp down really quickly, right? Just that little portion, and you're going to be able to see that consistency, because, right, as we know, consistency is key, right? How do we like it? Now, different people like jams, preserves at different thicknesses, right? Some people really want it like that Welch's grape jelly that's like wobbly. Some people want it a little bit looser, so all of those little variations, that comes down to personal preference, but that is another kind of quick and easy way to test to see what it's going to be like once it cools down. Cool. Great questions, everybody. Chef Bryce, anything that you would like to talk about that you saw regarding this week's work?
No, everything, you guys seemed like you guys are kind of crushing this assignment, which is great to see. Love all the different varieties of vegetables that people are using too. Definitely use what's local, and I think as this assignment goes, like, you have that availability of what's around you and giving you more of that freedom to really try things out. So you guys have been doing really well from the assignments I've graded. I know we have quite a few of you guys to still grade, so looking forward to it. But yeah, reach out with any of those questions. You can see how many factors that apply to using pectin and other things like that. Reach out to us. A few of you have, which is great. So we're here to help you out through the process.
Yeah, definitely. So far, what I've seen, great work. Nice mise en place, nice clean kitchens. Just a reminder, always label and date your sanitation and self ID. Still have to people not doing that, right? That's unacceptable, right? In a professional workplace, you're never going to be working without sanitizer. You're never going to be working without being in some places might not have as strict uniform requirements, but you should always be wearing long pants. Why do we say wear long pants? To keep from getting hurt, safety. Yeah. What happens when a hot bowl burned? Exactly. So you don't burn your legs. Yeah. Hot frying oil, a hot stock, a pot falls down and splashes all over your legs, right? Then you're out. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're wearing your long pants, that you've got closed-toed shoes on. I've been seeing some feet in there in photos, right? You're taking a photo in your uniform, and then I'm seeing some action prep shots with socks or bare feet. And it's just, I understand that you're in your home kitchen, but you got to act like you're stepping into a professional kitchen every time you come in here. Because if you were at a ground school, right, on campus, if you rolled in class without proper attire, you're gonna get turned away and told to go back home and change, come back properly dressed, right? Same like at your workplace. All right. Remember, y'all are heading out on externship in about 2 months or so. Get it in your head now that you want to be clean, right? Be professional, and stay, keep your sanitation and your station clean, right? That's key. Especially, let's tie this in. Sicknesses, all right? Now we have a huge spread of coronavirus. What's going to help stop spreading that, especially in a restaurant workplace, right? Monitoring how long you're washing your hands. Are you properly putting on enough soap, right? Right? Are you washing for enough time? Are you using hot enough water? Cold water doesn't do it, okay? It's got to be a length of time. So remember, think about all the waiters, servers who's running around picking up utensils and glasses from customers. Huge contamination, cross-contamination germs. Think of all the cooks and the chefs who are preparing food. Wearing your gloves if you're preparing ready-to-eat meals, if that's state legislation. All right. Also, obviously, it's an industry where you gotta be there every day. But if you are sick, you gotta think about that. Who are you possibly contaminating, right? So, just be sure you're staying nice and clean, everybody. Okay. So, Chef, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, with everything, and something that people don't think about, which was my biggest pet peeve in restaurants, was cash and how many hands that touched. And you can wash a glass, you can sanitize it. There's a lot of factors to it, but cash never does. And I would always have to get on my servers, wash your hands after handling that cash. People don't think about how many hands that passes by. So, and then does everyone know the trick for how long you should wash your hands for? Sing happy birthday. That's my key. So people are like, what? 20 seconds. So happy birthday song, wash those hands. It's not going to do you any good if, for one, your temperature isn't right for, it has to be between 100 and 120 degrees for your temperature. And then also that length of time. Really important. I want everyone to stay healthy. Sanitation is such a huge part of our business, and it can make or break you too. So just think of all those factors. Think of what's going on. So when we look for those self-ID photos and sanitation, huge part. We know you're not in the ground campus or in a restaurant, but these are the things you need to take away from your education right now. This is what is an industry standard. So it's really important. If you have questions about it, I'll talk to you forever about sanitation. It's fun in my mind. It's weird, but I enjoy it. So reach out if you do have questions.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got a comment in the chat about Elizabeth's daughter caught the flu due to handling cash, right? Wearing gloves now. Great. Yeah, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right, to stay safe. And this goes not just because we've got an outbreak of COVID-19, but this is influenza, right? The winter cold season every year. Think about that holiday season, right? Holiday cold season, weather season. You've got lots of family functions, lots of people, lots of gatherings, cash, everything. So just stay clean, everybody. All right. Cool. All right. So let us hop into today's topic, which is confit. Now, last week we talked about produce preservation, right? Taking what's in season, harvesting that, and either drying, jamming, pickling, curing, and saving it for later use. Well, way back in Southwest France, remember the land of Escoffier, France, there is a great dish called cassoulet. Now, in Southwest France, they are also famous for, remember we talked about foie gras, that fatty liver of the goose, okay? So that region has a lot of ducks and geese. Famous in their cuisine, they're making foie gras there, and they also make confit du canard, okay? The confit of duck. This duck would be harvested, killed, hunted, excuse me, and then slowly cooked in usually its own fat, okay? That's the traditional way. You would cook it in a lot of duck fat. And then it would be sealed in that fat, because what does fat do? What's fat gonna prevent from getting in? Air and moisture. Yeah, exactly. Air and water, right? Fat seals it in. When you get that layer of fat on top, what's going in there? Nothing. Okay? It seals it in. Okay? So you would slowly cook these legs of duck, okay, in its own fat, and it gets sealed in that fat, stored down in the cellar in cold area, so that you could go down into the winter harsh months, right? When you're not necessarily going out hunting every day because it's too cold, and boom, you have that meat ready to go. Okay, now let's talk about the cassoulet, okay? Cassoulet is, again, a hearty winter stew coming from Southwest. I'm gonna bring up a visual of you that oftentimes would have duck confit, along with some sausage, boudinois, and beans, okay? So I'm gonna pull up a photo so you get a visual of this. And if anybody was able to read the little link I sent out today, you got a quick idea of that confit de canard. And here we go. So, here we go. Here's some, many versions, right? Like we know, recipes always vary. You could have some different pieces in there. Sausage. Let's get a good one out here. This one looks pretty good. This one looks pretty good as well. But as you can see, right, this one looks like it might be, actually, that actually looks more like chicken to me, but maybe it's duck. Wouldn't you say, chef? Here's another one, right? So you can see there's like a really slow stew, roasted beans, and then sausage and duck confit. Now, this week we're gonna be making chicken confit because it's more cost effective. But if you have the availability to duck and want to explore, you can of course substitute duck legs for this recipe. Now, I'm going to pull up duck confit so you can see what it looks like as well. And here we go. All right. Now, I'm going to show you a couple pictures of this. So here's this one. That's what it's going to look like fresh out of that confit. Now, what do we notice about this skin compared to, say, this one? I can't see the chat if anybody's saying anything, chef.
Yeah, you're good. It's clear, pan fried and duck fat. So when we're looking at that, really think about that flavor journal and like, what about texture? Like what, when you're biting into that, looks fatty, oily, versus that other photo that Chef Catherine. Think about that texture. What do we think when that first bite, what are we tasting? Cold gel on the other one, yep.
So how do you think you go from point A to point B? The one that didn't have a lot of color, looked a bit oily and wet compared to that crispy skin. What do we think? How do you get there to there? Longer cook time. Good idea. Deep fried, possibility. Pan seared, roasted, broiled, right? Finished under some high heat so you can crisp up that skin. Because if we're cooking low and slow, right? Low and slow in that fat, you're not going to get anything crisp, okay? Remember, when we're cooking in fat, right? What do we do when we're deep frying? What temperature is that fat? You'd pan sear after. What temperature is that fat when we're deep frying? So it's high, right? Very high heat. Yeah. And are we cooking, or when we deep fry, is that a long cooking process or a short cooking process? Short, right. So deep frying is fast, high heat submerged in fat cookery. Okay? Confit is the opposite of that. Submerged in fat, but it is lower heat and it takes a long time, a few hours. Okay? That means you're not going to get that crisp. Just like if you think about braising, right? When we braise something, okay, submerged in, 2/3 of liquid, it's soft, it's succulent, right? Compared to pan searing, where you get that nice crust on it, right? Again, saute, pan searing, high heat, right? Quick. Braising or stews are low and slow, all right? You get different textures out of that, all right? So if you want to experiment a little bit with your confit, you can definitely, after taking all the required photos, do a little pan sear or broil on that confit and get that skin nice and crispy. It's not required, but if you want to challenge yourself, you can definitely do so, okay? So let me pull up the recipe so you get a good idea of this. Now, what else have you ever heard of the term confit? Has anybody ever heard of the term confit before? Yes. In what sense? Yes, at work. Okay. What were you confiting? Or what have you seen that's been confit before? Duck and pork, chicken legs. Okay. What else?
Sliced potatoes and onion.
Yeah. Okay. And what else?
Chef, if you wouldn't mind, I do have some examples of some confit that I've done.
Yes, one second. And please do.
Okay.
I just want to get
Right.
them thinking confit. Okay.
Sure.
What outside of meat? Have you ever heard of a confiture? Right. Confit of a jam. Okay. Right. So a confit doesn't have to be just meat. A confit can be something sweet. The word literally translates to preserve in French, okay? And that's something that's cooked low and slow. All right, chef, let's see some of the confit.
Well, I think, confiting, like we said, is that low and slow and you're preserving it, but it's that finished product too. So done a few of these in my time. 1 second here. So duck confit here. So look, see where it's crispy here, like Chef was saying. That's when, it's so tender and low and slow that you're able to, manipulate the bone structure. We were able to plate this bone, standing straight up so it can factor into our plating. But what we'd take is we'd sear that duck leg and get that crispiness because you want texture. There's a lot of texture you can evolve from when confiting. Let me see what other photos. Yeah, here's another one. Look at, you can get straight. That bone is really nice and loose, so you're able to stand it up, but that skin is, nice and crispy, developing that texture. So chicken, And I'm going to be honest, we confit this and then we flash fried it in the fryer. Like you got that crispiness, but it was still, since we're doing it low and slow, we're maintaining that moisture on the inside. And then we develop that crispiness on the outside. That's what's great about doing confiting, is you can really retain the moisture on the inside. Sometimes with, how many times have we braised things and it's become really dry? I mean, that happens a lot with meat. You can dry it out because you're not using fat, or you're not using fat, you're using a liquid or a stock, releasing that moisture in there. So this really maintains that moisture as well. Cassoulet, we did this. I thought it was kind of fun. Relate back to our cauliflower. We're using breadcrumbs and creating that, browning on top as well. Cassoulet is really fun because just it used to be a peasant's dish as well. So I actually have an article too, if chef's okay with me showing that as well. But look at this skin right here. I thought this was a really good picture on how we were able to get that skin nice and crispy while maintaining that nice moisture on the inside. So slow and low is definitely a key with confit. And then this is a really fun article I can send you guys too, but it's just showing the history of cassoulet and the duck confit and how it was a peasant's dish. Cassoulet is one of my favorite dishes, so definitely a fun read on that. Reach out like if you do want to attempt cassoulet, because you can throw a ton of things in it, and I think that's why it's really fun. And then, but it was also to preserve a lot of those, preserving with the confit, duck confit in there, as well as utilizing other stuff that might get thrown away, tying back into not wasting things. So really cool dish, and I think it has a lot to play with confit. Sorry, chef, just had to show off a little bit of some dishes.
Love it. I always love that. So, class, right? Presentation. Step it up this week, right? You don't have to just show us the confit. You can make something else and make it a part of it. Another classic dish that a duck confit will go with, which is you'll see this often in like a French bistro with French Dupuis lentils and carrots and a little bit of shallot and maybe some endive, right? Endive, curly endive, a really nice salad, something, remember, we keep talking about that acid cuts that fat, right? So confit could also be served, it could be served warm. It can also be served kind of cool, like not cold, because you don't want that fat to solidify, but it doesn't have to be piping hot, okay? It could be placed on top of a salad component, okay? Now, we keep talking about legs and thighs. That's all we see, right? Why do we think why are we not confiting breasts? More moisture in the dark meats. Meat is too dense in the breast, okay? Too dry of a meat, okay? Remember, just like we've talked about different cooking styles, right? Different cuts of meat, beef, chicken, etc., react differently to different cooking techniques, okay? Now, what's important about the legs? Do you remember way back making your stock in CU101, and we learned about what's connecting the bones in the animals? Why do we get such a nice muscle? Yeah, but what else? Why do we get that nice rich stock that is, remember when you want a good stock, it wiggles, right? What's in it? Collagen. Yeah, collagen and gelatin, right? Tendons. Okay, that starts to break down, and that's what we want, okay? And what do we know about stock? Takes a long time to make, right? You gotta go, and you're not rapidly boiling that. You're going low and slow, bringing it out, drawing it out, okay? So when we talk about deep fat frying, we already talked about 350 upwards, right? High heat. When we're doing confit, we're talking about 200, right? 200 degrees approximately, maybe a little bit lower, right? Because we're slowly extracting that fat, all right? Now, when we slowly extract that fat, okay, and start to change, right, the structure of the collagen, okay, right? It starts to denature, break down, okay? So when that collagen starts to break down, okay, right? And then, okay, I know this is one of Chef's favorite parts of the confit. We talked about this earlier. After cooking it for a while, you're gonna get a little bit, depending upon the size of the batch you're making, you're gonna get some natural juices in there as well, right? It's not just gonna be the fat that you're using and the fat that's releasing from the meat, but also a little bit of natural juice, right? Not a lot, but you've got a really savory and really nice base right there because there's a lot of gelatin in that stock. It's gonna be sticky, okay? That residual liquid. Now, I wanna pull up the recipe so we can talk about something. What do we think is gonna be important when we're using a bunch of fat to execute these dishes? Are we gonna just throw that fat out? There we go, there we go. No, no way, Jose. You're gonna wanna save that, okay? Number 5, strain fat and save for another use. Right? If we deep fry something, do we immediately throw that fryer oil out? Nope, we don't, right? That would be really not wise from a cost standpoint. It would also be extremely wasteful, okay? So when we're talking about the recipe, chicken parts, right? Legs or wings, you could do thighs. Thighs will work as well, definitely. I would actually suggest not doing wings. You can, but wings are pretty expensive for the most part, and you're not gonna get a lot of succulent meat, okay? Go for legs, go for thighs. Now, as you can see, this needs to sit overnight first with salt and spices. Why do we think that purpose of that is? Draw out moisture. Yeah, exactly. Okay. It starts a little bit of that curing process, right? That salt, like a dry marinade, it's going to pull it out. So overnight, the next morning, you're going to see a little bit of liquid, right, in that bowl, because that salt's going to start to draw out that moisture. You want that. That is part of an important step of the confit. Okay. Then the next day, right, you're going to go in. You're going to have your oil, right? And you need this to be submerged, okay? Fully submerged. If your chicken is not fully submerged, you are not confiting, okay? So if that means you need to put it in a smaller pan, that means you need to put it in a smaller pan, okay? You don't want to have your chicken above your oil level, because if you put that in the oven, you're not confiting. You're doing a combination of confit and a little bit of roasting, right? So one note on the bay leaves, if it's sometimes you can't find, yeah, grind your bay leaves up. You can throw them in whole, you can crush them, you can put them in a coffee grinder. Highly suggest everybody go out, do yourself a favor, buy yourself a little mini coffee grinder that you dedicate just to spices, and use that. It's how I grind my spices. It's how a lot of restaurants grind their spices, unless you're using a Vitamix and you're doing really large scale, making like garam masalas where you're doing a larger batch. But a coffee grinder is excellent, right? You could throw your little, if you had cloves, whole cloves and your bay leaf, you could just throw those in, buzz it all up, and you're good to go, okay? So don't worry about that. And then again, getting that oven to 300, cover that with tin foil, place it in there, and you're going to cook for about 1 to 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours. Okay. All right. You want that chicken to be almost falling off the bone. You want it to be tender. Now, a few things to note. You're dealing with hot oil. Don't fill your container all the way up to the top with oil unless you know that you've got really rock solid, steady hands. Okay. Right. Hot oil stinks. Okay. It's a bummer in the kitchen. Not good. So be careful, right? You're going to be pulling that out. Additionally, don't just go reaching into that. Let it cool down a bit. All right. Let it cool down. All right. Before you start going, because also it's just going to help with how it stays, its structure, right? Just that whole cooking process, right? You want to let it cool in the fat too. Okay. Now, one thing to note for executing this in a restaurant, right? You will have sorry, some kids playing outside. Spring. You would do you'd have a big hotel pan, right? You're gonna do a lot of legs at once. You're gonna cook it. Because you're not gonna spend 2 hours just cooking 4 legs. You're gonna do it a full hotel pan, right? Then you're gonna bring that all down to temp. You're gonna put that in the walk-in, and then it's submerged in fat. So when you have orders every day, you would take out a couple legs, depending upon what your numbers are looking like, right? If it's a weekend, you're going to take out a few more. If it's a slow day, take it a few less, but you're going to take those out. And then you reheat to order. That's when you would then throw that pan sear on there, right? Throw it, deep fry it, whatever your preference is. Okay. But that's how it stays. You're going to take a little bit out per day because it's staying in that fat submerged. In this situation, because we're not making a lot of actual chicken legs, you're going to strain that fat, label, date it, bring it down to temp, save it for another use, right? You can do a ton of things with that fat. You can cook whatever you want. It's going to have a nice, slightly aromatic note to it. It's going to have a little bit of that chicken flavor, and you can cook potatoes in it. You can cook, start a cassoulet with that, right? Anything you want. Because remember, what do we know about fat when we get it high heat? Remember, all different fats and oils have different smoking temperatures, right? Smoking temperatures. What happens when we cross that smoking point, smoking temperature? What happens to the oil? It starts to oxidize, okay? Starts to turn. Its actual chemical structure starts to change because it's gotten to too high of a heat, okay? Then flavor changes, okay? Then it's no good, right? So we're going low and slow. So you're not gonna have a lot of oxidation happening on this oil. It's not gonna start to break down because you're going at that low temp. All right, which is awesome. Save it. Save it, don't waste it. You're also using, about 24 ounces or more of oil, right? So you're gonna buy a big jug. Now, let's hop in. Does anybody have any questions regarding the chicken confit?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in chat, Chef. Frida was asking how long can this meat and fat stay in the fridge, just our shelf life. It can definitely vary depending on your meat, but you always want to be safe. Just have a good idea. Look out there on a lot of bacteria growth and stuff. I mean, we're preserving that, but I would say in restaurants, anything over 2 weeks is probably too long. So definitely look out there. I would say 2 weeks max would probably, for restaurants. At home, you could definitely test it, but remember, you are risking your safety as well, so I don't recommend that. And then just a couple, Chef, do you mind if I go on a couple notes?
Always.
So with your salt and why we're salting that chicken before, too, is as that salt sits, we're also penetrating down into that meat. So we're going to have a lot more even seasoning throughout that chicken as well. You know, think about the curing process. Why do we cure? When you let something cure in salt for a long time, that salt is penetrating all the way to that center. So with that confit, we're letting it sit overnight. That salt is penetrating all the way into, you know, close to that bone. So we have a lot more even seasoning, as well as, you know, as Chef Catherine talked about, letting it cool a little bit. Use a spatula to pull out. They can be very delicate. Do you want that? You want to keep those bones in there. You can pull those bones out at some point. You know, think about with presentation as well. And then that fat, saving it for later. Remember, the more times you use it, and if you keep straining, it's developing flavor. Your salt content is changing. So I hate to say it, but sometimes you need to taste it before, you know, you taste that fat before you reuse it. Because I've definitely was talking to Chef Catherine how many times I've messed up, and you know, my fat or my confit fat was too salty, and then I oversalted some of that duck, and guess what? I had to throw it away. Like I couldn't use it. So just be careful with it. There's a lot of processes, so just remember to always taste things along the way. But that's all I had. Just a couple notes, Chef.
Awesome. Thank you, Chef. All right. So if everybody's cool with confit of the chicken, let's move on to the potatoes. All right. This is a slightly different technique because we're going to be slicing these potatoes. It's going to cook a bit quicker, but the goal is still low and slow. All right. So let me pull up that recipe so you can see where we're at. All right. Here we go. And there it is, right? So for this one, we've got, you're gonna wanna put this one, first, the first thing you should notice is you're gonna take that olive oil, okay? And you're gonna mix it with garlic and herbs. Now, if you can't get your hands on fresh herbs, you can substitute dry herbs. It's not the same flavor profile, but of course you can. Now, what do you think is the point of heating the oil and herbs and garlic gently over low heat? What are we doing there? Why don't we want to use high heat? To infuse the flavor? Yep. To burn, right? Yeah, exactly, right? We don't want burn. We just want to infuse the oil because that oil is then going to be used to confit the potatoes. Okay. Now, please note, you want to put this in a fairly smaller container, right? You don't want to have a big, huge one. Lay those potatoes out. It's nice to shingle them. You'll get a better cooking on that, overall even cooking. But this is not going to take as long, all right? Cover that pan. And of course, we are talking about small red potatoes. What did we talk about back in German potato salad week, right? A lot of people were talking about that difference between starchy and waxy potatoes, right? There's a reason for this. A starchy Idaho rust potato, not gonna hold up well to this technique. You want a waxier potato for this, okay? That's what you want for this. Otherwise, that starchy potato is gonna suck up a lot of that oil and it's not gonna hold its shape as well, okay? Fingerling potatoes. Does anybody know and remember what fingerling potatoes look like? Yeah, I'll just pull up a visual in case somebody doesn't. These are great confit. Really pretty common and extra delicious. Okay, this is what fingerling potatoes look like if you haven't seen them. These are awesome. All right, great for confiting. Look really beautiful on a plate as well. Cut on a bias, stacked up. They come in multiple colors, everything from white to purple, all right, and every color in between, but really delicious. So hopping back into that recipe, shingle those potatoes, layer them in, throw them in that low oven, mix them around a little bit if needed, okay? Drain that oil and reserve for another use, okay? Now, if you're super tight on a budget and you're like, hey, you know what? I don't have enough money for all this oil. Make one first, save that oil, use the oil in the next one, right? That's a way to be a little bit more sustainable. Now you're not gonna be able to cook them at the same time, obviously, right? But you can conserve, okay? Olive oil is gonna give you a nicer, rounder flavor for your potatoes. Additionally, like we said, normally a duck confit is cooked in its own duck fat. So if you, for some reason, have a bunch of chicken fat on hand, right? Go ahead and cook it in there. If you've got a tub of chicken fat, that would be awesome. You can do it in that, right? Does anybody have a question regarding the confit potatoes? Is that a yes, Elizabeth, or was that a yes from some other time? From some other time? All right, cool. Sometimes I lose track of the chat while I'm pulling stuff up. Baking low and slow in oil in general. Yes. That's what it's all about. Low and slow in oil. Yeah, you can use fingerling potatoes, but this recipe, remember, recipes are designed in a way that we can execute and evaluate them. This is going to be thinly sliced potatoes. All right. So if you use fingerling potatoes, how are you cutting them? Your cooking time is going to be completely different. Okay. If you're going in whole, that's going to change everything. So I would recommend following the recipe if you've never confit before, right? Because that's how we evaluate everything. If you want to do a side batch of fingerling, put them both in, do it. Do a little exploration, right? Experimentation. Get yourself some red potatoes, do this, a batch of that, and then do a batch of fingerlings on the side. See what you like. See how that texture changes, right? When you're doing a fingerling potato, you're going to have a little bit more of that of texture, right? Because it's not penetrating all of the flesh. You're keeping that skin, right, on the fingerling potato. So you're going to have a different texture, and you're going to change the cooking time. Okay. So, all right. Let's see if there was anything else that I needed to bring up. Or Chef, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I mean, I think we covered it, but with the potatoes, using those fingerlings, what a great time to follow this recipe, because chefs want you to follow the recipe, especially when you become the chef and managing your cooks. You want to make sure they're following it. But what a great time to reserve that oil and then trying it again with the fingerlings. But fun thing about fingerlings too is developing that texture. Just think back, if you are going to play around with the fingerlings, think about that first duck leg that we kind of saw that was oily and didn't have that crispiness. That's great, depending on what texture you're trying to achieve versus I used to confit fingerlings and then actually smash them into a pan and develop that crispiness. So, I suggest following the recipe and then playing around, because, you're being able to reserve that fat and use it for another time. But as I said, like, chefs love for you to follow the recipe. So definitely stick to a recipe. Gives us a better basis to grade off of as well. So just make sure you do that, and excited to look for this, this assignment, because confiting's fun.
Definitely is. Also, remember, you don't have to serve both of these together. You could make your confit potatoes one day with a different type of meat, and your confit chicken or duck, whatever you choose, on another day, right? Up to you how you schedule your execution of these dishes. But otherwise, remember, next week, makeup assignments are due. All right, last chance to knock that out of the park, and bring your grade up. You want to finish strong. We're going to be making some dairy products in week 11, and then week 12. You're going to have some freedom in creating your final appetizer and entree. So start thinking about that now, because we want to see some really solid work, right? That's going to be your last meal that you cook while attending culinary school. So we want you to bring your A game. Show us what you've learned over these past 12 months, okay? Yeah, Shanna, we're getting into grading tonight and tomorrow. just hold your horses and they'll all be coming to you soon. Okay. But otherwise, class, reach out if you have any questions. Let us know and have fun with this assignment. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you in a few.
Yep.
Bye.